Hi, everybody. Got a few people joining us. Welcome to On the Couch with Claire. It's been a couple of weeks since I've done one of these, actually, so apologies I've been away, but we're back today for a Wednesday. Different time, different day to what I usually do because we have an international guest. Very exciting. I know a lot of you already know who's coming on because I've been very excited about it. So without further ado, let's get into it. Today we are going to have the author of a book that I have to say is one of my favorite parenting books, if not my favorite. And any client who has seen me over the last few years know that I almost insist that every family I work with reads this book. So today we have Kim John Payne joining us live from the States, and he is the author of, I think, Simplicity Parenting. And those of you who are regulars in our clinic know that you can grab the copy of the book in our reception. And most of my staff here, I think, are sick of me going on about it because I do drone on about it. And were very thrilled for me when I told them that Kim was going to join us on the couch and have a chat about his book. And I think at the moment, with the way 2021 has panned out and where our families and our community is at the moment in deciding how we are going to construct and build 2022 and what that looks like, this is such a great opportunity to pause and reflect and decide whether we need to simplify our lives and, most importantly, our children's lives. So without further ado, I'm going to bring Kim in and welcome him to our podcast. Hi, Kim. How are you?
Hey, Claire. Nice to be on the couch with you. I feel like I'm sitting right next to you.
Almost across the oceans. Where exactly are you, Kim? Where are you joining us from?
I live kind of not far from Boston and New York in New England in the United States, but I'm from the other city, Melbourne. Sorry.
Oh, we're in Melbourne. Yeah. Look,
Yeah.
you don't sound too much like that anymore. You must have been over there for a while, though.
A little while. I had the best education, and I'm still recovering from the best education money could buy. So we weren't allowed to sound like Crocodile Dundee.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much. We really appreciate it. We've got a short time today, so let's get straight into it. I think a lot of people that work with me will be familiar with your work. However, for those that aren't, I do want to kind of just scroll it back a little bit before I jump into questions I've got and talk about your ideas and theories and practices about simplifying life and simplifying practices for our children. There's a term that you use in your book, Kim, quite a bit, and I love it. And it talks about having a reverence for childhood. And I love that idea of being reverent to childhood and what childhood's purpose is and the function of childhood without what seemingly I think has happened, which is us kind of squashing childhood and not allowing it to evolve and be what it should be. Can you just start, for those who are completely have never heard of simplicity parenting, just expand on that idea for us about the purpose of childhood and why we should be reverent to it?
Yeah, we've almost gotten into a habit, and more people are starting to call it a little bit, but we've got into a habit of trying to pack 18 years into the first 8. It's like where it's a little bit like almost like a philosophical choice these days. That do you see childhood as an enrichment opportunity where you've got to get a lot, you've got to get it, and you've got to get it fast, or do we see it as an unfolding experience? Right.
Yeah.
So right there's a bit of a choice to make. And one of the things that I'm noticing all around the world is that more and more parents have got this kind of gut instinct that where most of our intelligence is, right? In our instinct that something is off, something is not right about the new normal of too much, too soon, too sexy, too young. It's just too much, and very few of us had to cope with anything like what our kids have to cope with now. And a lot of parents are starting to say, hang on a minute, this is just overwhelming our entire family system, and and enough already. We've got to dial this back. And my interest is, yeah, but how do you do that sensibly? How do you do it so that it's not another parenting fad? It's not another parenting book. And I'm not a big fan of parenting books, and I know that's weird because I write so many of them. But yeah, I know. But it's like parenting books. They de-alpha you as a parent. If you're not really careful, you read the book and you put the book in charge. I was at a dinner a little while ago, and a 10-year-old and a 12-year-old daughter were listening to their mother talk about the latest parenting book she'd just read, and the other one looked at the older one, the 12-year-old looked at the 10-year-old and said, "Look, it's okay. It's okay. She's read another book. She'll be okay in a couple of weeks."
Because they've seen that cycle before. And I actually think him that commonly, this starts pre-children. This starts, I've seen women who take on pregnancy as a research project, and that's what I call it. And it's, the minute there's kind of actually before conception, it's like, what diet should I be having so that my child has the best genes to, have this? And it starts then. It's the anxiety about this starts, the minute kind of we have conception about that, those 9 months, and then the birthing plan, and then it has become this, not obsession, but not like any other generation. I can't say it's a turn for human behavior and history of thousands of years of procreating. That's how I feel. And it's never. And the other thing I say to parents is, never before have we had so much information about parenting, neurologically, scientifically, attachment styles, and yet our children are the most fussiest, most demanding, most highly strung, worn out kids than we've seen ever before. And
it's a little bit like, I love the consciousness, like you, that parents are bringing to what we're doing. Like I'm a dad of 2 kids, and I love that kind of inquiry and that kind of consciousness. And it's I guess what simplicity parenting tries to do is keep that in the kind of conscious frame, and that can help it not spill over into being anxiety producing. Because when you keep things simple, when you keep things balanced, right, it's not just for the kids. When we keep it simple, we keep it balanced, it's also for us. We experience it too. We start to experience a little more spaciousness in the day, a little more time to connect with our kids, because it's more than ironic to read all these books about attachment and connection, and yet have no time to connect and attach, right? Because we're researching all this stuff. So it's got to do with bringing our consciousness, being intentional in our parenting, but bringing that intentionality to stuff that just feels common sense, that doesn't feel like we're speaking in someone else's voice, and that just keeps it basic, keeps it real, because our kids have got a radar for that. They know when we're being ourselves, and they know when we're not. And that's where the work of the Simplicity Parenting Institute really tries hard to say to parents, the changes you make, keep them doable, keep them organic, keep them small. Make your aim really, really humble, and just build very, very slowly. But begin with really questioning this supersized family life and the kind of pressure that family life is now being subjected to with this, like I mentioned, this new normal.
Yeah. If we could indulge me for a minute, because and maybe just as I said, for those watching that haven't read the book, can you go back into how some of these ideas in your mind were crystallized, and in particular, what I find, I'm interested in the neurological side, I suppose, as a psychologist. What I found most interesting, could you explain to some of the parents watching about what you termed as that kind of chronic stress response, I think you called it, or ongoing stress response, and how that compared to presentations for children from different cultures and war-torn situations?
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, when I began training in psychology, and I'm okay now, Claire. I've recovered. I'm good. Thank goodness. It's a long recovery, right? Isn't it?
Absolutely.
But I was working in a group home for kids who were really, struggling big time. So I went to lectures. I worked there in the evening. I worked from 6 o'clock at night to 2 o'clock in the morning. It was actually called the action shift because it was,
Yeah.
And anyway, during the day, I was going to college, going to uni, and there was a guy there who was fascinating, and he was talking about what we now know as PTSD. He was talking about combat veterans who weren't doing so well. Nervous, jumpy, hypervigilant, startling really easily, a lot of night terrors, rejecting of anything new. One little thing would happen that wasn't okay, and that would spread right through the day, generalized anxiety and all that sort of stuff. And as he talked, honestly, I thought he was describing the kids in my group home, but he was describing combat veterans. So I approached him and just asked him about it. And it set me on a little bit of a, like he said, well, it's not impossible. But my experience is with Second World War, Korean and Vietnam vets. So this was at the end of the Vietnam War. It was sort of the time when there was a lot of dislocation in Southeast Asia. So I volunteered, and I worked in various places through Indonesia, Jakarta, and then up into the Thai Cambodian refugee camps, which were still massive. And I saw nervous, jumpy, hypervigilant kids. Saw it again. I thought, okay, but there's a reason for this. These were dislocated kids who'd been through a war. I get it. Even though they're not combat veterans, they've been through it.
That was obvious trauma.
It was really obvious trauma. And then when I moved to the West, I moved to London in the UK to study this a little bit more, to do postgrad work. I had a little counseling practice, and there through the door came kids from various socioeconomic, racial backgrounds, all different kinds of backgrounds. But they looked like the kids in Cambodia. They looked like the kids in Jakarta. They looked, maybe not as intense, but they were presenting in this, and it was very, honestly, Claire, it was really disturbing. I didn't want to let that thought in. I thought, hang on a minute, these kids are from fairly normal backgrounds. So I started looking into it, and the more I looked into it, the more I realized that this was what I started to call cumulative stress reaction. Is it that it was a slow buildup of stress, and a lot of brain imaging equipment for the very first time was becoming available for research purposes. So you could get, basically, the idea that I had was that these kids were suffering from under the radar stress, but it was cumulative, and it was building up and building up and building up until the point is that these kids looked like they were living in an undeclared war on childhood. And honestly, that's how it seemed. They were living in an undeclared war on childhood. They were just being overwhelmed with the pace of life they couldn't keep up with. Fast forward a little bit, and I started basically, as an Australian living in London, you can get away with a lot, because everyone figures, is it just an Australian? So I thought, well, what about if we take away some of that cumulative stress? So I started working with parents, and we started saying, okay, what can we do? Like, just no formulas, no nothing. What can we do to There we are.
We're back. We're back.
Only I see two of you. Oh, now one. And now I almost see you again.
There we go. Oh my goodness.
Magic.
Oh,
that was a lovely dramatic pause, Claire.
Talking about cumulative stress.
So then, so the answer is, so what we started doing is unstressing these kids' lives, and the more we unstress them, the more they recovered from ADD, ODD, PD, OCD. No shortage of Ds, lots of Ds available. But here's the sort of sort of short but clear version of something that's I've been working with for years now. Is that what we discovered is that all kids are quirky, because as we unstress their lives, their problem, they went from disordered, like ADD, ODD, OCD, whatever, they went from disordered to being just plain problematic. And then as we kept calming their lives down, they went back to being just quirky. That makes these little kids so lovable and kind of infuriating sometimes, but it was just, and the mums and dads would say, I feel like I've got my little boy back. I got my kid back. Can we keep doing this? And I say, absolutely we can. So we kept simplifying, kept dialing it back to whatever a parent could do. And the astonishing thing, and it still moves me to this day, even though it was years ago, and hundreds of thousands of kids have been through this protocol, because Claire, we've got over it's about 1,200 simplicity parenting coaches around the world. So there's a lot of folk out there doing this work now. It's a bit of a grassroots sort of simplification movement. But these kids were no longer problematic, disordered, no longer quirky. It was their gift. The same thing that was like their quirk. The way I looked at it is the quirk is an inflamed, when a quirk gets inflamed, it becomes problematic. You calm a kid's life down, and the quirk, when it's calm, actually is their gift. The same kid who's ADHD, hyperactive, their quirk is that they're just busy kids. Their gift is they're movers and shakers. They're fantastic, these kids. When their life calms down, then they make the right comment at the right time to the right people. And it's strong and it's clear. Whereas when they were in amygdala hijack, right, they, in fight or flight, freeze or flock, they were making maybe the right comment, but at the wrong time to the wrong person and absolutely at the wrong volume. And their timing was off because they were in survival mode. I'm not in any way suggesting there's not, tendencies towards disorderly emotions and behavior and intrusive stuff. What I am suggesting is that when we calm down what I call the soul fever, the emotional fever, when we calm down the fever, it's not just our kids get a bit better, it's that they're genius, the things that they are really, really good at. Like the kid who's got an OCD or ODD or whatever, like the obsessional kid, their quirk is that they notice patterns. They're secured in their world by rhythm, ritual, and patterns. You calm their life down and you keep balancing, and they'll go back to that. But their gift, their genius, is that they notice things that are out of place. They notice patterns. They notice if they're playing in the playground in their fourth grade, and they're playing in the playground, and there's a little kid who's sad, who normally plays but is not. They'll be some of the first kids to notice it and go over and say, hey, you okay? They're really dear hearts, because now they don't have to fight for survival, because life now is child friendly for them. So the adrenaline, cortisol can all calm on down, and now they can be the very best they can be. And oh, by the way, their grades in schools, their academic, we did a study into this, within 4 months, the kids on our study, 55 kids who are ADHD, inattentive and hyperactive type, a lot of them had a defiant behavior. within 4 months, 68% of them retested no longer had clinically significant ADHD.
Wow.
It was actually had eased. And the parents would say, well, it's gone. And I'd say, no, 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 it's not gone. It's sitting right there waiting to happen again. You speed your stuff up and you'll see it. You'll see it on a dime. But keep it calm, keep it quiet, keep it just, I mean, it's almost embarrassing, but just give your kid a childhood.
Yes.
Right? And they're going to be good. They're going to be fine. Will they be little buggers sometimes? Absolutely, they will. But not in a problematic, disordered, clinical way. And part of the working with folk like you, Claire, and your colleagues, one of the things that I love most of all is when people, if I may say, like you and your team there, simplify things down, quieten things down, help us as parents just reestablish the family system and connections and attachments and all that. Just calm it on down. Then you can actually see what the residue of the problem actually is. It's almost like, it's like otherwise we're treating stuff that really may not need it. It's a little bit like this when someone visits with you and you help them quieten and simplify. It's almost like the metaphor I think of is that there's like a tap pouring water into a cup, into a child's vessel, into their little being, the tap of life, all this stuff, like all the play dates, the clubs, the homework, the just stuff. Some of it's okay, some of it's too much, but it's now, if that's pouring into a little kid's cup, into what they can cope with each day, what's happening for so many kids is that is this spillage all over the place. It's all good stuff, but there's too much of it. There's too much. And that spillage is what we call behavior. And the decision is, do we want to spend our life mopping up behavior, or can someone come see a person like you, Claire, that helps them put their hand on the tap and turn the tap down? Yeah. It's so much easier to turn the tap down than it is to spend years mopping up behavior. And that's what you guys do. And I'm thrilled that you do it.
Yeah. Got a bit of feedback on my mic. I'm not sure whether you can hear that. One of the things that obviously has come to light this year, and we talked about briefly earlier, was the fact that worldwide we have been in these lockdowns as families. As I said, Melbourne, the most lockdown city in the world. Hello to everyone in Melbourne if you're watching. Now let's talk a little bit about practicalities, Kim, for my families watching, because lockdowns forced families to simplify. And that must have been, I mean, first of all, do you have any comments on what you observed through lockdowns? Because I'm fascinated of someone who has advocated for reducing both the scheduling of children, the amount of running around, has advocated for being present and family connection. And then you've got this whole wide world movement where we've all been forced to do that. Were you sitting there thinking, oh my goodness, this is the best experiment ever? Or, I mean, and what were your observations in the US about the impact on families?
Yeah, and worldwide, the feedback from all our coaches in Sydney and Melbourne and elsewhere, all around the world, it's almost like Mother Nature sent us to our rooms to consider what we were doing, and we weren't allowed to come out until we took responsibility, right? We've just overheated. We're overheated the planet, but we've overheated our families. And one of the things that I was seeing is that families that were living somewhat simply and a little bit more balanced, and not life in the super fast lane, it's almost like they could apply the brakes more slowly and not drive over the cliff. It's a little bit, to mix my metaphors, it's a little bit like some families built the family arc of simplicity and balance before the COVID flood. That's how that strikes me. And the what I've noticed in in general is that because of the intensity of the lockdowns, because of what's been happening, a lot of parents now that we're coming out of this, hopefully, are starting to say, okay, how many play dates do we really want to have? How many clubs? How many sports events? How much screens? Because it's a little bit like we have become like, it's almost like, it's a bit like after Christmas, you know, where we've eaten and oh, Claire, have we gone down again? The light, is the connection gone down? I'll just pause a little bit and see if we come back on. And you can do your magic trick again. You did your magic trick again.
Magic trick again. Anyway, sorry, Kim, we were talking about lockdown.
Yeah, the lockdown. I don't know how much you caught of that, Claire, but it's what I've noticed with the lockdown is that a lot of parents now, all around the world, have given the tragedy of the lockdown and the loss of life, but a lot of parents have commented also how much more connection they've got to their kids. It's a mixed bag, right? Because it was forced connection, it was forced time together, and it was fairly unsupported. It just was, and that's no one meant that, no one could help it, but it's just the way it is. Coming out of lockdown, hopefully, what a lot of parents are now wondering is, how many play dates were they all strictly necessary? How many after school clubs? Do I really need that extra sporting activity? What is essential and what is not essential? And as we build our lives back now, it's really beautiful to see how many parents are being intentional about it, saying, not that, a little bit of that we can do. Yes, that's lovely, we'll do that, but not that. And it's a point of discernment, like, I don't know, that is completely golden, and it's thrilling to see how many parents aren't wasting this opportunity, but actually doing it.
What a gift to us that we can do that. And so, yeah, and so going through and deciding what we put back in, and that's what we're getting from parents as well. And I don't want to go back to what life was like then, of running around and the hectic nature of it. Yeah. Just on practicality. Yeah, sorry, go.
No, please, Claire, what were you going to say?
Well, I'm just conscious of time, and look, there's, in terms of the practicalities now of how we do curate and build that life, and what I love about your book is that it's a blueprint, and people can pick and choose and start small, and there are practical things in there that people can do today. I think we're all really aware of the overscheduling. That doesn't mean we don't do it, but everyone knows, oh yes, the kids are busy. There are two elements in your book that I don't think are discussed enough about the complexity of life with children, and that I see every day. And one is the amount of stuff children have, and I think that is becoming an increasingly that is being spoken about more and more. There is increasing awareness on that, but I was wondering if you could provide a comment on the impact emotionally, neurologically, that too much stuff has and what I'm talking about, let's just get down to the nitty-gritty for parents watching, is the bedroom that you open and literally the drawers are spilling out of bright plastic noise-making toys, and we know that's what a lot of bedrooms look like. And the second area that I see that is deserving of a lot more talk at the moment is that I am seeing in my room the 6-year-olds come in who have full knowledge of how evil Trump is. Not that I'm commenting on that politically, but they come in with a full knowledge of the American, political system, and they come in with a full knowledge of global warming, and they come in with this, and parents are beaming with pride on their little eco warrior. And I think we forget how much stuff that brain has to do before it gets to the point where it can solve those high complex problems. Anyway, so I think those two areas in your book, for me, I love working with parents on.
You know, Claire, I live not far from New York City, and on 9/11, I was helping kids who were coming up out of the city after that event, and one of the things and I saw how absolutely shocked, upset, and traumatized these children were, who were right in the city watching this happen right there, and their parents worked, you know, in Midtown right there, and we were there for several days working with these kids in the city. And then months later, a study came out, and it basically, it was, the nutshell of it was that kids who watched the falling of the trade towers over and over on quarter-hourly news cycles were more traumatized than the kids who were actually there.
Wow. Yeah.
We've got to stop as a society thinking that kids seeing this stuff, hearing this stuff, doesn't really stress them out, because they're little kids, and little kids live in a world of what I'm told I need to be able to take hold of. It's got to do with developing competency. It's got a feeling of, you know, that I can take hold of the world. I can manage my world. I'm gonna build this treehouse. I'm gonna build this cubby. I can dig these ditches. I can drain this water. I can. That's raising can-do kids. When we give them a lot of information and it's just information, and they can't actually practically pick up a tool and do something about it, what happens is that gets dumped into that amygdala I was mentioning, into a trauma memory, and it builds up and it builds up and it builds up. And one of the things that I'm a big proponent of is raising kids to know that it's a beautiful world, that there's beauty in the world. There are beautiful people, that Nana and Grandpa are lovely, that we've got good neighbors, and the firemen and the fire people and the police are there doing that. When bad things happen, you know, there are good people out there doing good work, and we know that. And when children are raised in a world where they know there are good people, it doesn't mean we pretend there's not hard things happening in the world, but we let children know that there are people who know just what to do to help them, and they're doing the very, very best they can. And we can, you know, and you know, that kind of feeling, because if we don't give our kids this picture of good people and a good world, as they slowly grow up and they realize that there are things in the world that are just wrong, that need righting, how do they know what to right it to unless they've been raised with this image of beauty and goodness? Because how do they know what to change it to if they've just been raised with darkness, with information they have that overwhelms them, and they see wrongs in the world? What can they do about it? They have no point of reference to shift it towards. It's not that I don't want kids to be eco warriors. You know, it's not that I don't want that at all. My own two kids work in areas very demanding and have taken on big stuff in the world that they want to make right, but because they want to make it beautiful, because they were raised with knowing there are good and beautiful people around them. And for me, that is not trying to hold kids in a bubble at all. The metaphor I think of, that I have always come back to, is that our homes, as best we can, need to be safe harbors. So they can sail their little boats into the safe harbor, restock, replenish, restore, and then chug out into the world and do what they can. And when they're little, they'll chug, chug, chug just a little bit out, and then they'll come back. And when they're older, they'll go further, and then they'll come back. And it's our job to provide that replenishing, restocking, restoring, recreating, so that when they go far out into the world and really start taking on, like my daughter works with immigration rights on squads of people that get in cars when the immigration people are making raids, and she gets in between these great big burly policemen and the people who they're trying to arrest. She's just this 19-year-old kid, right, doing this work. But, and she comes on home and just decompresses, relaxes, restores, and then out she goes. It doesn't mean we try and hold our kids back from that. In fact, quite the opposite. As they become more and more competent and capable and brave, they can stand up to these immigration police. And my daughter's just this little kid. She's quite short, petite, and she stands up. There's been photographs of her. It's gorgeous. Where she just stands right up to these police and asks them for their warrants. And she's been appraised of all the things she needs to say together with the team. She's just a little part of a team, but she didn't know any of this stuff when she was little. And what she did here, she was assured that there were good people dealing with that. Now, lastly, Claire, I know we have to close, but the decluttering piece that you asked about, it may seem like a small thing, like declutter and organize your home. But the way I think of it, particularly now, it's a question of what's going on out there and what we can provide in here. It's out there in here. Out there, the world is pretty choppy at the moment. A lot of things are unpredictable. There's a lot of stuff going on. So in here, if we declutter and organize, this feeling of spaciousness, that we've got space in here. Out there, it feels like the world is pressing in. In here, my sweetheart, you have space. You have space to move. Out there, it's choppy and unpredictable. In here, we have rhythm. You know what's coming next, because out there you don't. Are we back at school? Do we have masks? Do we not have masks? It's choppy, and it needs to be. I get it. But in here, this is how we eat. This is our bedtime. This is our meal time. In here in our home, we know what's coming next, because out there we don't. And in this book that was written way back in I think early 2000s, called The 7 Habits of Highly Successful People, one of the things that Stephen Covey said, which really struck me, was that a highly successful person, and I would say a non-anxious person, I would add that to it, knows the difference between their circle of control and their circle of concern. And the circle of concern is really big. The circle of control is relatively modest and small. But if a highly successful parent works within their circle of influence and control, because out there we've got a ton of concerns, and we all do, but if we work within our circle of control, anxiety's calm, fear's calm. So what can we control? Well, we can declutter. We can make life rhythmical and predictable. We can dial back schedules, and we can filter out a bunch of inappropriate adult information. If we do those 4 things, or even 1 or 2 of them, we're working within our circle of control, and our anxieties are going to lessen, and our kids are going to be able to be with someone who is much more present.
Yeah. And I think as parents, that's our obligation to fiercely protect that refuge of our home, isn't it? Just, fight for that right to choose and control how our home is going to be for our little ones. Yeah. Look, I could talk to you all day, Kim, and I know that'll be all night for you. So that's why I'm going to leave it there. We've had a ton of people jump on and have a look, and I think our parents will find this invaluable watching this on replay, despite my disappearing acts. For which I apologise. What can parents do if they would like to find out more about your movement and information about what you've spoken about today? Should they jump on that website?
Yeah, I know what you mean with your question. I'll answer it properly in a moment. But what people can do really is go to their hearts and their gut. That's where they can find the information out. That's really where it is, in our instincts to be present for our kids and connected. That's where it is.
Yes, thank you.
But what you meant by your question was, at Simplicity Parenting, at that website, there's a ton of stuff. Not too much stuff, because that would be ironic. And probably one of the most helpful, I'm told that one of the most helpful things are these Simplicity Parenting podcasts. I've been doing them for years now, long time.
I love them. They're great.
They're little. They're just 10 minutes or so.
Yeah.
And all these little nuggets of simplifying. That's also perfect. That's on iTunes and Spotify and all those platforms.
Perfect. Excellent. It's been a pleasure. I'm going to say goodbye now and end our broadcast at the moment for our families, but I think that really has hit home to where our community is at the moment and what we're thinking looking ahead for 2022. So thank you very much for your very generous time today, Kim. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for your comfy coach and coach. Bye-bye.
See you later.